All right, Ryan, here are questions that I've got from an Oregon standpoint for Wisconsin. We talked about Brayden Locke at quarterback a bit, but talk about the offensive line. Jordan Birch might play in this game, could play, should play, you call it whatever you want. Even when he hasn't been there, Oregon's defensive line has been nasty. Derek Harmon, who you may remember from Michigan State, is really, really good. And Mateo Uyunglele, who was a former five-star recruit, is coming into his own in a sophomore season, and there are a bunch of other guys that can make impact plays as well. So your confidence level in Wisconsin's offensive line holding up in pass protection for, as you described, a mostly air raid offense for Brayden Locke and head coach Luke Fickell is what?
Yeah, I really also wanted to just ask you, what's it like to have a bevy of 4- and 5-star blue chip?
It pays off. It pays off. You know, I hear sometimes from fans, recruiting doesn't matter anymore. It's all about the portal. I don't know. I'm looking around at Oregon's roster, and it's like, look, a former 5-star left tackle, he's playing. Former 5-star defensive end, he's playing. Former 4-star defensive end, he's playing. I think this high school recruiting stuff can still pay off.
So it's fun, huh?
It's a good time. It's a good time right now.
Yeah, so to answer your question, man, I actually feel pretty good about the Wisconsin offensive line. I think the thing is offense is a bit of an ecosystem, and it's the other parts around it that don't always come together. Right, it's hard to expect an offensive line to hold up when Wisconsin against Penn State was continually in, and Iowa as well was continually in 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8. Right, if you give a really good defensive line 3rd and 8s with a good coaching staff, they're going to scheme stuff up. It's just hard. It's difficult. So I think a lot gets put on this offensive line. Now there is a fair point of, well, why are you in 3rd and 8s? Because you didn't run well 1st and 2nd down. That's on the line for sure. But even in those downs, you know, I was going to put 8 in the box, 9 in the box. And again, that's tough on an offensive line. A lot of it comes back to that lack of a consistent passing game, which I think really hurts the line's ability. This is a pretty good Wisconsin offensive line. It's not a great one. It's not an elite one. They have 2 really veteran offensive tackles that played a bunch of ball. Both will probably get a shot in the NFL later round type picks. They have a veteran center who was with Luke Fickell in Cincinnati, was an all AAC performer. And then they have a really talented young guard, Joe Brunner, that they like a lot. It's a good offensive line. It's not deep. If an injury happens, which they've been lucky to avoid, they'll be fine. But again, I just don't think the offense sets them up in a position that's at times the fairest thing. So I don't know if that's an answer. It's a bit of a rambling answer. It's a good line, but it's tough to be a great line when you're continually in 3rd and 8. It's tough to be a great line when you can't pass the ball.
Yeah, and flipping over to the other side, Wisconsin's run defense this year hasn't been stellar. 164 yards a game allowed. Probably not where Luke Fickell would like it to be. What is your assessment of how they stopped the run this year? Because Oregon's passing attack just put up its worst total of the season last week without Tez Johnson, who I wouldn't think plays this week for the Ducks. Maybe against Washington. Certainly, I think he's trying for the Big Ten championship game, but I don't think he'll be out there for the matchup against the Badgers this weekend in Madison. But Oregon last week against Maryland, who had been pretty solid against the run themselves, went for 180 yards and 5.8 yards a carry. What's your assessment of how Wisconsin has handled that area?
Inconsistently. So this goes back a little bit to the point I made originally, where Wisconsin doesn't have those 4- and 5-star guys on the defensive line. This is a defensive line that coming into the year was looked upon as one of the spots on the team that was probably one of the weaker points. And then before the year, they lost their best defensive end. So it's the defensive line that's not particularly deep, and it's also bereft of talented impact players. So that's a problem. And then Coach Tressel, Mike Tressel, the defensive coordinator, has been playing a lot of light fronts, and fans have been getting
Jim Tressel's son?
Yep. Connection there.
Nice.
To the Big Ten. Yep. And he was with him at Cincinnati. So he came over to Madison. He's the defensive coordinator. He's been playing a lot of 2-4-5 and just not really wanting to adjust out of that, which in some situations is fine. But when you're playing Iowa and they throw the ball 10 times and score 42 points, bro, put another defensive lineman on the field. So I think there's a lack of talent, but there's also been some coaching adjustments that it seems like haven't happened. At the linebacker level, they brought in 5 transfers this year, and it feels like the entire year has been this constant push and pull of trying to find the right Lego pieces to put into that. So I think consistency has hit there as well. It's not been a great rush defense, specifically when you look at what Wisconsin traditionally does, and that's hurt them as well. Teams have been able to run when they've wanted to run, and I don't really see why that would change against Oregon. The Badgers secondary is better. It's one of the strengths of their team. They have veterans back there, a couple really good players, veteran safety, veteran cornerback Ricardo Hallman had 7 picks in the Big Ten last year. But again, when you can give teams 2nd and 4, 3rd and 2, right, your secondary can't play up the way it's supposed to.
Against Penn State a few weeks ago, a game that I actually picked Wisconsin to win in an upset because it looked like they had kind of righted the ship for 3 games. They played some lower level competition, Purdue, Northwestern, and Rutgers, but they blew them all out. I mean, just absolutely blasted them. Played well on offense, played well on defense. The Nittany Lions went for 173 yards in that game on the ground and just under 5 yards a carry. Do you feel like Oregon is going to have those same sorts of numbers, or is there an adjustment that you think this Wisconsin defense will make, or is that just going to be available to Oregon anytime they want? Hey, you can push for 200 yards on the ground.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would like to see coming out of the bye week a few adjustments, maybe play a little heavier fronts when teams are gashing against the run. But you know this too. You've watched a ton of ball. When you're 10 games into a year, teams usually kind of are who they are. Right? Like there's not a whole lot, even coming out of a bye week, that you can like pull off the mask and be like, surprise, we stopped the run now. Like we figured it out. It's 10 games in, you kind of are who you are, unfortunately. Can they be a little better? Yeah. I think Wisconsin was in a bad spot in that Iowa game, right? You had the Penn State game at night, big environment. You kind of cough it up. Then you have to go to Kinnick. This bye week came at a great spot, like a great spot for them to get a little fresher. So it might be a little stouter, but it's been an issue all year, and I have no reason to think it's going to magically get fixed for Oregon. I am curious if you flip it. Like I'm trying to find where's the dent in the armor for Oregon. By the way, really quickly, I always say Oregon. Is it Oregon or Oregon?
Sounded like you said the same thing twice.
Perfect, and I'm good.
You're good. If I haven't corrected you, if I haven't pressed pause on this recording to correct you on the pronunciation of Oregon, then you're doing fine. Because anytime someone says Oregon, I say no. There's none of this Lou Holtz Oregon nonsense. Just get that out of your lexicon right now. So you're good. You're good.
Some type of like little difference there, but I'm good then. I'll just call them the Mighty Ducks of I don't know. I'll go somewhere else with it. But can Wisconsin, I think the one area where if I look at it, and outside of the nonsense of they get 3 turnovers, they return a kick for a touchdown, Oregon's defensive line is very athletic. Can you run on them a little bit? Because it does look, if you look at average yards per carry, they're more middle-ish of the pack of the Big Ten. And again, I'm searching here, right? I'm trying to find where the dent may be. That Oregon's 10-0 for a reason.
Yeah.
Where's the dent? Where's the scenario outside of football craziness where Wisconsin makes this a game, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think that. Well, can we save that as question 1 for the third segment? Because I had one more question to ask you, and then we'll. Yeah, and then we'll flip things around. Wisconsin's pass defense is top 10 in yards allowed per game this season. Is that because they're facing passing offenses that are inept, or is it because they are good? Because they haven't played Ohio State, they've played Iowa, they've played Penn State. Neither one of those teams I think are great throwing the football. Or they've played Rutgers, who like to run it with Kyle Monunga. Like, what is behind the strong numbers for Wisconsin defending the air?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's kind of like, let's say you're a martial artist and you can't defend against kicks, but you're okay against punches. Well, a guy's just going to kick you all day long. They don't have to throw a punch, right? And my point is, teams have been able to run the ball pretty effectively. They haven't really had to throw a lot. So there's an element of that. If you can just run the ball consistently against the Badgers, why air it out? Now, Wisconsin secondary is pretty good. That is legitimately the strength of this defense. Ricardo Holman, I mentioned, had 7 picks last year. He's a veteran corner, really, really good. Great ball awareness, good quickness. Hunter Wohler at safety is maybe the best player on the defense. Led the team in tackles last year. Again, another veteran. Preston Zachman is another veteran at safety. Has played a ton of ball. Nizer Forkran on the other side at cornerback has been playing really well. So that is the strength of the team. It makes sense why teams haven't wanted to test it as much. There's games that we'll play where teams just literally won't throw the ball at Ricardo Holman because they don't want to deal with that dude. So talent is there. That's the strength of the team. And also teams can just run the ball. And to your point, play a Rutgers, you play an Iowa, you play a Northwestern. Those also aren't passing threats. But Wisconsin has played in Bama. They did play a Penn State, who again is good, decent through the air. They're not elite, but they played some teams that will try to throw the ball around. But I think ultimately offensive coordinators, other teams, if Iowa only had to throw the ball 10 times because they could just run at will. So you're going to take the easier candy if you can. And I think that's mostly what we've seen with the Badgers defense this year.